Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Esther Avant. With 20 years of experience in the health and wellness industry, she has guided countless individuals toward achieving their goals, both in health and beyond. As a health industry veteran, author, speaker, and coach, she's helped people apply the same proven strategies used in weight loss to propel their careers and level up their lives. Esther is the co-owner of Made by Me Coaching, the host of the Live Diet Free podcast, and the author of To Your Health, a lifestyle of health, happiness, and confidence. Through her coaching, speaking, and programs, she provides the tools for you to take control of your well-being and success. Welcome to the show, Esther.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, listeners, Esther and I met about a year and a half ago at the park with our kids, and we met over a mutual workout program we do actually, but then we found out we were both podcasters and we've been friends ever since. So if you notice a bit of familiarity in this interview, that's because we've been friends at the park with our kids for a while now.
I love it. Yeah, I remember when we first met, when we were talking about our podcast, you said you have one about books, and then I was telling you that I had a book coming out, and here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start from the beginning a little bit. So I feel like this bio is really great, but I feel like you're so much more than that. So tell me a little
Oh,
bit about who you are.
thank you. So I am a mom. My son just turned 6. I am a Navy wife, which is another thing we have in common. And I have worked in the health industry for 20 years, starting off as a personal trainer. Actually, my kind of origin story is I just wanted to get paid to work out. And I started working out late in high school when you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. And I was like, is there a way I can get paid to do this? Turns out there is. It's called exercise science. And that led to me then becoming a trainer. And just sort of as my career evolved, I went from personal training to nutrition coaching. And, that came from realizing that so many of my clients were working hard in the gym, but most of their lives was taking place outside of the gym, and just how important the nutrition piece was. And at the time, I was working 2 jobs. I was bartending nights and weekends, and then I was working basically the rest of the hours at a gym. And I would sometimes see clients at the bar,
Okay.
and, it just sort of like it gave me some missing information that, I'd see them on Monday morning and they'd just be like, man, I'm so frustrated. I'm not losing weight. And then I'd be able to be like, well, all right. So I saw you on Friday. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. So it just started to realize, yes, exercise is very, very important for dozens of reasons, but it's just a small piece of the puzzle as far as our overall health and well-being goes. So that's what led to nutrition. And then I had all of this, scientific knowledge, and I was still personally struggling. I was over-exercising, I was binging and restricting, and, just really feeling like if I know all this stuff, why is it so hard for me to actually do it? And that's what led me down the path of personal development and understanding the psychology of behavior change and why knowing what to do isn't enough. And all of those things ended up getting incorporated into the coaching that I do, because I realized it's, the exercise and nutrition are just the tip of the iceberg.
Mhm.
And there's so much more to it than that. Everybody, you can Google, you can ask ChatGPT, write a workout program for me, write a meal plan for me. Those things are simple. They're not easy though,
Yeah.
because of the rest of your life and because of your brain. And the real kind of meat and potatoes of what I do and what I enjoy most is helping get to the root of what is making it hard and how do we solve for those things. And what I noticed in all this time I've spent coaching health, weight loss, is that the same principles apply to any other goal. And it's almost like once you kind of crack the code, once you know the formula in one area, you start naturally applying it to others. So I was seeing clients who were trending in the right direction physically, seeing the scale go down, getting stronger, all the things they wanted with their health. And also, it was having this spillover effect into their jobs, their families. And that's what really inspired me to want to kind of use health as the catalyst for other positive change, because it very often is the thing that ends up on the back burner.
Yeah.
And I think we're all better off if it is a front runner in our lives consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. I am loving this part of our conversation because I feel like in our hangout lives, we don't talk about this. And as a physical therapist, you're just like singing my language here right now. Because I do think it's something that what you're saying, right, is like these lifestyle changes, they seem so simple on the surface, but creating something that you're like compliant and consistent and take into like your lifelong journey with you, that's the challenge, right? And even I do it, right? Like, oh, I'll have this extra piece of chocolate and I'll go work out another 10, a couple more minutes in the gym. It's like, I know better, quote unquote, right? We have this knowledge, but our brain is so easy to fool us. Like, I have that extra piece of chocolate. It sounds really good, right? Or, I mean, that's something so simple, but even with knowledge, we can talk ourselves out of doing, what we should. And so, can you speak to, like, I guess maybe what you've discovered, like cracking this code you're kind of talking about, if you don't mind, like give us some tips on creating these lifestyle changes or being consistent about it.
Love that question. Okay, so I think the foundation of any change has to come from a combination of self-compassion and personal responsibility. And this is can feel like a thin line to be walking, because we do tend to sort of oscillate from one extreme to the other, is we are very good at justifying our inaction or making excuses and things like that. And also, we're really good at beating ourselves up and having really lofty expectations. So we naturally sort of have this all or nothing approach where it's like, well, either I have to do every single thing perfectly all the time, or look at all these reasons that I can't possibly, and it's not my fault.
Yeah.
So, in order to make any sort of lasting change, you need to balance those two qualities that are seemingly at odds. You need to know when to give yourself the grace and the compassion of just being an imperfect human. Okay, so I had the extra piece of chocolate, even though I knew better. This does not need to be a big deal. I don't need to beat myself up about this.
Yeah.
I can just move on. There's the compassion piece. Then the personal responsibility comes in that you don't want to just keep doing that and keep forgiving yourself and never changing anything. So it also has to be followed with, why did this happen and what am I going to do about it? Sometimes, things just happen and you realize this was kind of a one-off. It was like a snack of opportunity. It's no big deal and
Snack
I'm
of
just moving on.
opportunity. I love that's my life, actually. I think that's my life motto.
Um, but very often there are patterns and there are things that we can pick up on of, well, if I keep having the same thing happen, is it because I have too much access to these things that I'm trying not to have? Is it that I am, I'm hungry and this is the easiest thing to grab? So actually taking responsibility for, if I don't want to keep repeating this, I'm the one who has to change it. How am I going to do that? So I think at its core, self-compassion and personal responsibility are the basis for everything you're going to do. I think the next thing that's really important is taking consistent action at the handful of behaviors that are going to give you the most bang for your buck.
Okay.
Going back to when I was talking about being all or nothing, with how much information we're bombarded with, there's like this seemingly endless list of things that we should be doing.
Yeah.
And depending on how much time you spend consuming content, you're just sort of convinced that you need to be doing A through Z at all times, or you're not going to see any results. And it ends up feeling so overwhelming that either you don't start or you do start, you can't maintain it, and you totally stop. So what I call the big rocks are the the habits that'll give you the most bang for your buck. And if you focus on those and figuring out what you can do to make doing them consistently feel easier, essentially like get them automated, get them becoming the default option, you get better results with less overwhelm and what feels like less effort once you kind of get over that hump. So identifying and then mastering those key behaviors for whatever your goal is, and then honing in on that consistency. And I think the final piece for success is having help, being willing to ask for help, being willing to accept help, and just not have this mentality that you need to do everything by yourself. I
Yeah.
think we do have sort of this individualistic, I don't know, society where we feel like there's something wrong with us if we go to somebody and say, "Can you help me with this?" And having learned that lesson the hard way myself in building my business, I'm now very quick to find the people who know how to do the things or who can help me. And it's made a world of difference. So whether that's, just instilling an accountability buddy that you check in with or take walks with, or a coworker at work who's going to bring their lunch also, and you guys will eat together instead of going out, or if it's hiring a coach or joining a run club, there are so many ways to get help and support and to just normalize the person that you want to be and the behaviors that you're trying to make habitual in your life. So I think with those four things, if you apply them to any goal you have and then you stick with it long enough, you'll be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you're saying of not creating this threshold of being too high, right? And I think we talk about in the PT world, and you might use them too, like SMART goals, right? Like specific, measurable, attainable is like the big one, right? Because if it's not attainable, you're going to go back into like that shame spiraling that you were talking about before. And so I like what you're saying there. Like, don't do A through Z. Like, just pick these, like maybe 3 to 5 that'll be the most bang for your buck. And we always talked about like cushioning them in your day at like the same time. So, okay, I brush my teeth every morning and night. I'm going to do these 5 minutes of stretches, right? Like, I mean, this is world of PT again, but you could apply this to anything, right? Like, people ask me, how do you read so many books? And I'm like, well, again, back to kind of choices, but also like every night I brush my teeth and then I go climb in bed with a book. Like, it's just part of my daily routine. And and then you just get consistent with it. Or I consistently wake up early before my kids because I realized I liked it. Do I like rolling out of bed at 4:40? No, but now it's a habit that I've created in like the past 3 years, and so it doesn't feel so hard, right? And like you kind of mentioned that once you kind of get over that hump, it's like, okay, like this will get better, and it's now cushioned in your day. So I like what you're saying about just being attainable, because I think that's a huge piece of it.
Exactly. Yeah, being a beginner is tough. And you're absolutely right that I don't know if this reference will mean anything to anyone, but when I used to go to carnivals as a kid, there was this game where you would push a bowling ball and it was on this like metal track and you'd have to try to get it over a
Oh
hump in the
yeah.
track, but you wouldn't push it so hard that it would come back over. Um, and I often think of that when I'm talking about building new habits because there is this sort of like uphill. There's a learning curve where just like it takes effort and you don't feel good at it and you're just sort of like stumbling around. That's when you're like on the way up the hill. And most people give up on the way up. And then they just come rolling back to the start, more and more frustrated, beating themselves up. You just have to keep going till you get over that hump. And then you sort of drop down the other side and it feels so much easier. So I think one of the main reasons that being patient and being committed and being consistent is so important is that it gets so much easier once you just get over that hump. So if it's still feeling hard, you're still on the uphill. But if you stick with it, it will reach a point where it starts to feel second nature and you're no longer having to wrestle yourself out of bed at 4:40. You're more so just like, this is what I do and it's worth it because I want to do this reading.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is a great point, right? Of like it just rolls. Eventually, you will reach a peak, but maybe you need maybe you need to convince yourself that you're going to stick with it long enough to reach the peak, right? And what's going to be your motivation behind it? I'm giggling as you're talking because I feel like these are all skills I'm trying to teach my kids, right? Like things will be hard, but you try it. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be. Or the personal accountability piece, I feel like is a big thing. And I laugh because it's like we also have to remind ourselves of these things as adults too.
1,000%. I notice the same thing is, our kids are about the same age and I'm noticing the same thing with mine too, is often the things I'm saying to him, I'm like, all right, that is a good reminder for yourself also. This applies to you.
The humbling role of being a parent, I guess.
Yes.
So, well, I feel like we're probably already talking a bit about your book. So, kind of dig in, tell us a little bit about this. It came out yesterday, according to our air date of our show.
I know
Um,
it's always funny talking about things that haven't happened yet, but will by the time anybody hears this. So yes, it
yeah.
came out yesterday. Yeah, you nailed it. We've really kind of talked about the outline. Essentially, in my time spent coaching and in the really comprehensive way that I coach, where it's yes, it's exercise, yes, it's nutrition, but it's also all this other stuff. It's the support, the guidance, the education, the community, it's the responsibility, the compassion. I just I felt like I wanted to make it accessible for anyone. And I, over my years coaching, honed kind of the formula and the recipe, I guess. And I would walk clients through a course that would evolve, from what do we need to know right away to, the longer term, how do we make sure that these changes stick? And now that's what the book is. So it starts off talking about what I consider to be the three C's of success, which are consistency, commitment, and confidence, and how these are not like a linear, first you're consistent, then you're committed. They're all happening simultaneously. And we all tend to struggle with at least one, but
Hmm.
generally two or three of them, and how to how to foster those three C's. So that's the first part. The second part is kind of the three-part formula that we were just talking about is the exercise and nutrition big rocks to focus your energy on to start doing the things right away, the types of support that may be helpful for you across the journey and how those things might change over time, where maybe you work with a coach in the beginning and then once you feel like you're better on your own 2 feet, maybe that's when you build your community, where you join a run club or you meet friends for walks instead of happy hour, things like that. Just sort of how what that evolution looked like. And then the third piece being, how do you develop the responsibility and the compassion to get out of that all or nothing mindset? And then the third part is really kind of tactical, like how do we start doing these things? So it includes the weekly check-in form that I would have clients fill out and what I call life admin, which is essentially sitting down with your calendar and looking at what you have coming up that week and making sure that the things that matter for your health are on the list. It tends to be we know which kid has to be where at what time, which day. We know when our work responsibilities are. We know everything for everyone. And it's like, well, if I can fit in a workout sometime, I will, and I'll like try to swing by the grocery store. So getting that stuff on the calendar because it's
Yeah.
important. And really just sort of walking through, like it's one thing to know and read this stuff. It's another thing to apply it to your life. So the third part is the application to make sure that it doesn't become another book that people just read with good intentions and then it collects dust. My hope is that it will actually be a book that you use as, the kind of the compass and take action on it.
I love that. And I also loved, like, I was like, ding, 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 when you were saying, because I realized listeners might be listening, think, okay, well, what habits should I be choosing, right? Like, that list could be overwhelming. And there's a sense of that being overwhelmed too. And you're like, I'm just not going to do it because I'm too overwhelmed to even sit down. So I like that you said you'll help them choose like the big rocks to kind of pick to where to focus your energy on to get you started. Because I think that is huge. But also the part, like you said, to really apply, right? Because I think it's so easy to pop on an audiobook for myself, especially like a nonfiction one. And I kind of listen as I'm going, but then I never really apply it to my life. So I love what you're saying about the application piece of that too, because that's so important. And I think, again, with your type of book, maybe grabbing it as a physical copy so you can really do this work with it is important.
Yes, and each chapter has journaling prompts, and I created a book portal with extra resources. So there you can print off separate journaling pages if you don't like to write in books, because I don't either. And it has like the full form, how to do a weekly check-in with yourself, monthly, quarterly, annual. Any of the resources that are in the book are in the portal, plus additional ones like a 30-day workout plan and some really good stuff like that. So that was my hope, is that 'cause I know that I have certainly read many more books than I've done anything with.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
hope is that'll like make this as effortless as possible to actually do something with.
Awesome. So, listeners, it's called To Your Health, a lifestyle of health, happiness, and confidence. So, go grab yourself a copy. I'll have links in the show notes. I want to talk a little bit more to you, though, about the writing process. So, what did you learn about yourself through writing this book?
I love that question. I learned so much about myself, starting with the fact that I can write a book.
Yeah.
I had a very kind of distinct moment. We were living in Germany. I don't know. All I remember about it was we were in Germany. I was in my bedroom in our German house. And I just kind of had this realization that I had been saying I wanted to write a book for a long time, but I kept telling myself, I don't know what I'd write it about. I don't know enough yet. All that,
Mm.
sort of like imposter syndrome. And then I just had this moment of awareness where I was like, the only difference between you and like the quote unquote real authors that you admire is that they've done it already. And they probably didn't know how at first, but they just decided I'm going to figure it out, and they did. And I realized that I could do the same thing. And I actually applied, kind of the formula to this goal, and was like, well, I need some help here. I don't know anything
Mm.
about anything. So who can help me? And I made a post in a Facebook group asking for recommendations of writing coaches, got one and bought her course that walked me through how to, she calls it mind spaghetti or brain spaghetti, how to like take that and put it into something usable. So, first you sort of brain dump onto note cards, and then you put those into, you know, like items together, and then you formulate your outline, and then you just do like the worst rough draft that you can is just sort of get words to paper.
Yeah.
I saw a really, or I heard actually the woman who ended up being my editor said something once about how writing is the only art where you need to create the clay first. You need to create the medium first, and that's your rough draft. That when you're a sculptor or a painter, you have the canvas, you have the clay, you're starting with
Yeah.
that, and then you're just shaping it into what you want. Whereas with writing, you're starting with a blank page.
Hmm.
So first you need to create something to work with, and then you can make it something good. So that was really helpful at shifting my expectations from the words I'm writing are going to become the book to the words I'm writing are like step zero.
Yeah.
Like none of those original words are in the book probably, but it's where you start. So
Yeah, I think that
I
frees your mind of the pressure a little bit, right? Of like it has to be right the first time. Really just like brain dump it and get it there.
exactly. And it was wild to see. I think the version that is in print now is probably version 5. And
Okay.
it's just amazing to see the transformation. So after I did that self-guided course, I joined a mastermind that came with an editor, and we did editing sessions. And anyway, I've gotten off track a little bit. Your original question was, what did I learn about myself in the writing process? I learned, I further strengthened my belief that, kind of this formula applies to everything, because I blocked out chunks of time
Yeah.
that were reserved for writing. And I reminded myself that I can get done more in a little bit of time than I think I can. And I have to be really committed. When that alarm went off and said, it's writing time, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was write.
Yeah.
But I made myself do it. And I got the whole rough draft done in, I think, 6 weeks of writing twice a week. So
Okay.
that came together more quickly than I was expecting. And I really I thrived with giving myself hard deadlines that felt challenging. This was when we were in the middle of moving from Germany back to the US, and I sort of chunked things out of like, I want the rough draft done before we leave. And then I committed to starting with my editor at a certain date and told myself, you need to have version 1 ready by the time you start meeting with her. And then we met weekly, and I had to have what we had talked about previously done by the time we hit the next session. So I gave myself this series of deadlines that felt ambitious, and they were. But you just hear so many people who talk about, yeah, I got the book, 90% of the way done, and then just sort of like fizzled out, and it's been sitting
Yeah.
for years. And I was like, I do not want that to happen. So I will be really, really focused on making sure that I can get this across the finish line. And and I did. And that, I think, is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned is that I can do things that I didn't think I could or that I don't know how, and that the challenge and the discomfort of not knowing how and of being new and kind of stumbling along and learning is really worth it because I feel so much more confident now that other things that I want to do, I can because now I have this as an example
Yeah.
of something else that I've accomplished.
Like a huge accomplishment. I think you and I looked up the stat. What was that? Like 0.01% of people have published a book? Where it was so
Yeah.
small.
Yeah, which is, I guess there are a ton of books out there, but I guess you have a lot of people who write a lot of books and
Yeah.
even more people who don't write any.
Yeah, or like you said, the 90% draft that never gets past the
Right.
90% draft.
Right.
This could be a really naive question because I have not written a book. I'm in that other like 99.9, you know, 8% of people that have not written a book. But do you think, because this is something you've been doing for 20 years, right? This is a formula like you've really fleshed out for what has worked for your clients, what has worked for you. Did that make it a bit easier for the writing process? Because this is what you've been doing like not every day of the week, but like day in and day out, you've been using this process for many years and refining it along the way.
I very much think so. I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how quickly it came together because this has just been my everyday for so long. And even though everything in the book came like organically and I wrote it specifically for the book, most of what I was talking about I had already talked about previously. I had
Yeah.
blogs on it, I had done podcast episodes. So I wasn't like creating it out of nothing. I already had the ideas. So I think that helped a ton. And I also think writing nonfiction is way easier than writing fiction. I've started trying to read more novels. And, like my son and I just finished the Harry Potter series. Like any one of those sentences is like a work of art,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't like I'm sure I could if I wanted to, but like that type of writing doesn't interest me at all. I think it is much easier to write something that is, it's not that there's not stories in this book, but something that's like more matter of fact and is like a
Yeah.
user manual as opposed to this work of art. So yeah, I do think that made it easier.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking as we are talking about. I'm like, this could be a really naive view of like how you write a book because I have not done it myself. So, you've already kind of talked about you obviously want people when they read your book to really use it, right? Utilize it, apply it to your life, really dig in. And if you're comfortable writing in the book, go ahead and do it. But I, like Esther, still cannot bring myself to this day to write in books as well. Um, are you working on any other projects?
I am. So part of kind of what happened in writing the book is that I feel like it became like my like manifesto of like everything I have to say about this topic is in this book.
Okay.
And as a result, it made me just not really want to talk about it that much like on social media. And I'm excited for a little bit of transition in my career and doing more speaking. And I co-founded this company that works with individuals and with organizations to come in and do workshops with leadership, to offer corporate wellness, things like that, to try to have a bigger impact. Part of what I've seen is that one of the big reasons why it's so hard to make time for our health is because work is monopolizing a really big chunk
Yeah.
of our time. And a lot of corporations aren't very health minded. And I think there's a world of good that we can do if we help corporations and organizations shift to helping clients find a better work health life balance and things like having walking pads and being able to take an actual lunch and not have meetings through it or normalizing eating during a meeting if it's at or if you're hungry what all those things. So my main project right now is I'm working on a keynote speech about essentially what we've been talking about, prioritizing health as a means to reach other important goals. And I'm excited to kind of run with that. And then I have a second book that's starting to formulate in my head on the topic of self-compassion and personal responsibility that I think could provide a middle ground. There are a lot of books out there. There's extreme ownership and there's the power of self-compassion, um, and I think we want to combine those two things. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about those two kind of projects in the future.
I love that. And I think good luck to you because I think once you can reach what you were saying, right, of that spillover effect of like if we work on the health and wellness piece, how that spills over. So if you can get, convince corporations that like, hey, this could be a positive bonus for your company of like your employees are starting to thrive, that's only going to make their work thrive too. So good luck to you on doing that
Thank
and
you.
convincing to pull them into your circle. Well, you've already kind of switched gears a little bit to some book titles. And so let's switch gears to who you are as a reader. What type of books do you enjoy reading?
You'll see from my flight, I am really big in personal development, nonfiction, psychology, behavior change. I just think this stuff is so interesting. And the books that are really well written on these topics tie in a lot of the research and a lot of storytelling and a lot of great examples that make these more lighter reads as
Hmm.
compared to, just reading research or a textbook or things like that. That's my go-to. Recently, I've been trying to branch out a little bit more, and our book club has helped that, there's sometimes you need a break from listening, learning about brains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to get more into some fiction as well. I've actually been surprised that I have liked a little bit of historical fiction. I love the Harry Potter series, even though I wouldn't say that I like fantasy or anything else in that genre. I've been doing a few biographies and autobiographies. I'm just trying to be a little bit more um, broad with my interests. I've been going to the library and just sort of like perusing the shelves and seeing what comes out to me. I've done some beach reads and just some lighter stuff. I like to see what my local little library has and try some of those. So a little bit of everything, I guess, but a very strong emphasis on personal development.
Yeah. I tend to read very similarly, like have like a serious something I'm learning about, but then have the fiction read, especially at night when I'm like my brain is so tired. I'm like, okay, give me the fiction easy read, right? But in the morning I'll read something more that's like maybe spiritual or personal development. And so I totally hear what
Exactly.
you're saying on that. And my little bookish heart is like, yay, broadening your reading horizon. So take note of what you love, and then you just kind of start rabbit holing into that genre.
Yeah, actually, one of the best books I read, I guess it was this year, was one of the Kristen Hanna books that you had recommended to me. So that's I've heard that most of her books are kind of heavy like that. So I've been trying to like space them out
Yeah.
and do something happier in between. But that was like I probably stayed up all night finishing it.
Yeah, you had to know what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have to have a box of Kleenex with Kristen Hanna. Okay, well, you have also, well, one other question. In your busyness, how do you find time to read?
I like you. I read at night. I've we haven't even turned our TV on. The last we watched the Super Bowl, and that was the last time we turned the TV on. So
Okay.
we just like don't have that as a distraction. So if I'm not reading, I'm doing a crossword puzzle or coloring or something like that. But very mostly like you, get my son to bed, crawl in bed, and start reading. So it's usually to unwind at the end of the day.
Yeah, as a little side note question for you, our TV watching totally changed when we moved overseas because we didn't like we had Netflix at the time, but then you'd get sick of like what was on Netflix. So that was really when my I really started to increase my reading in the year because I didn't know Italian either to watch Italian shows. So I haven't watched a TV show since we've lived in Sicily. I mean, loosely I'll say that, but I have not followed a TV show. Let's change that since we moved to Sicily. So, did that change for you guys when you lived overseas?
It probably did for me. We that Mattis was like 2 when we moved over. He was watching a lot of Netflix, and actually the reason that we ended up going cold turkey was because as we were moving back, my husband was like, "I think we gotta like nip this in the bud." We noticed that he wouldn't want to go to the playground because he'd rather watch Netflix, or he'd say like, "I'll go, but then can I watch a show after?" And it was just like, we don't want you to be active to
Yeah.
earn screen time. So we went cold turkey March of 2023 and just
Yeah.
haven't gone back.
Yeah. I love it. Again, that's like what I'm like, oh, grab your book instead or a puzzle or
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah, yeah, we do a ton of puzzles too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have brought a book flight with you today. Can you tell us how you chose these books?
I went over to my bookshelf, which I realized my husband had color coordinated
I love it.
by type. It's not just by color, but it was very easy to find because we have very different taste in books. So his is all historical fiction and like fantasy type things, and mine is all personal development. So I found my section, went by color, and just sort of looked at which ones I felt like had biggest impact or stuck with me the most, or that as I was reading, I was telling myself, you're going to want to go back and refresh on this at some point in the future. So those are the ones that I chose.
Nice. So, what's the first book you brought today?
All right. So the first one is Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Okay.
And this one was really eye-opening for me to realize that who we are isn't unchanging. We all tend to flock to like the personality test and like, oh, what does my number tell me about me and what is my horoscope? And we want to just like be kind of told who we are, which can be good if it is moving you in a direction you want to go in, but it can also be really limiting in starting to feel like, oh, I'm just not blank.
Hmm.
And when you realize that who you are and what you're good at and what you do is changeable, it's so empowering to just realize, well, okay, what is it that I want to do and who do I need to be in order to do that? And you just start becoming that person. I never would have thought I could be an author or a speaker because I'm introverted, because I am, quiet, I'm shy, all those sort of limiting beliefs. This book helped me realize that that just doesn't have to be how I identify. That can be part of me. And I can also have aspects of my personality that I turn on when they would benefit me. So that the subtitle Break Free from Self-Limiting Beliefs and Rewrite Your Story. So
Yeah, I love
that's
that.
number one.
I wonder if he's written one about relationships because it had me thinking of like, when Eric and I will have a little disagreement and he'll like, I think he's thinking I'm going to respond like the old me. And I'm like, I actually didn't do that. You told me you didn't like that.
Yeah, that's
But
really
like
interesting.
within relationships, that happens too, right? Like not just our own self-limiting beliefs, but I think it's hard in relationships too. Like we can
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. That's a great. I'm going to see he's written several and
Okay.
I wonder if that is any of them. If not, it would be a great topic for another one.
Yeah. And it is, as you were talking about too, it's so easy to default to like, well, this was me or whatever, right? And I think that personal accountability piece, right? Of like, that could be warring with that of like, no, we can change and we can do something different.
Yeah.
So love it. Okay. So that was Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. What's the second book you brought today?
Number two is The Book of Mistakes by Skip Pritchard, Nine Secrets to Creating a Successful Future. And what I really liked about this one is it's told in story form. So it's not this dry, here's mistake number one. You're learning these mistakes through this sort of intertwining story throughout the book. And so you see the mistakes unfold. And I feel like that really helps kind of strengthen your learning of them. This is one that I love taking notes when I read. So I have notebook after notebook of like notes that I'll probably never use about random books. But this is one that I was taking notes and I was like, I want to, laminate this list or put it somewhere that I can always see it because it's just really good reminders of, how to live your your purpose and your best possible life.
Yeah. I always tell people that will be like, I don't like nonfiction. I'll be like, look for these ones, like this book, right? That are more story based, but they're teaching you at the same time. Because I think it reads like a fiction book, but it's set in the nonfiction realm.
Exactly. The lesson kind of sneaks up on you and you're just like,
Yeah,
oh, I was immersed in the story and now you got me with a lesson.
absolutely.
Sort of like Aesop's fables, I guess. It's like you
Yeah.
get the kids in with the story and then there's this takeaway at the end.
Yeah. What can we learn from this? So now this is the
Exactly.
adult version here. So we have
Exactly.
The Book of Mistakes by Skip Pritchard. And then what's the last book you brought today?
The Courage to be Disliked by Ishiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga.
Okay.
Hopefully I didn't butcher those. So this one is How to Free Yourself, Change Your Life, and Achieve Real Happiness. And I think this one is really interesting, kind of similar to the Book of Mistakes. It it's told through a conversation between a young man and a philosopher.
Okay.
So the young man basically is playing the role of the reader. So he's asking the same things that I'm wondering as I'm reading it, and the counterpoints of like, no, but how can that be true if, or what do you mean by that? So what the young man provides in the story is the opportunity for you to get the answers to what you're wondering about this sort of philosophical book in the first place. And it just talks about how to be brave enough to change, which I guess, we've got this through line through
Yeah.
these books, and how to ignore the limitations that are imposed upon us, often by us, and how to find, what will make you happy.
Yeah. I have heard someone else brought this book as part of their book flight. Carly Pepin, I think she was like in the 30s. Listeners, I'll like include it in here. But when she talked about it, I was like, oh, I have to read this. And now, listeners, you can hear right now that it's been a year and a half probably since that episode, and I still haven't read it, but it is on my TBR. And I'm like, okay, this is my second nudge from the universe that I should read this book. So, and does it read kind of like a story because it's in this like conversation based way?
It does, yes.
Okay.
And there are several meetings of the young man and the philosopher, and he essentially, he'll learn a little bit, and then the philosopher will say, like, that's enough for tonight. You need to go absorb this, think about it. You decide if you want to come back for more. He's really a skeptic in the beginning. And then over time, he basically presents all of these different arguments and these counterpoints. And just like one by one, he gets answers that he's just like, oh, well, if all of those things are true, which I believe them to be, then I guess this is how it is. And it's this real kind of awakening for him. But yeah, the storytelling does help with that also, because I've tried to read philosophical books before, and it's just like there's like
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, it's
So
like
this
too
is a
broad
nice,
almost.
yeah, this is like a more digestible.
Okay. All right. Adding to like my current, maybe by the end of the year, right? Like, yeah, Esther can be my accountability partner.
Yes.
All right. So, The Courage to Be Disliked by Ishiro Kashimi and Fumitaki Koga. Thank you for bringing those. How I love to end our show is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions, so you can answer these really quick. Are you a rereader?
No, with the exception of these last two books in the book Flight, because
Okay.
they are like they warrant it.
Okay. Awesome. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Called Chasing Cupcakes by Elizabeth Benton.
Okay.
It it's I think part of why I realized I could write a book too. I'm not positive, but I think she self-published it. It just really made me realize that anybody who has something to say can write a book. And it also was really, really helpful. It's one of the books that I recommend to almost all my clients. The subtitle is How One Broke Fat Girl Transformed Her Life and How You Can Too. And it's a good read, and really helped me realize that writing a book wasn't out of reach for me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I love that that was kind of like, usually, sometimes I'll ask people, like, oh, was there a book that made you want to become a writer? And so I love it. Here, you're kind of double answering these questions. Where is your favorite place to read?
We have this reading nook that we created in our living room. We bought an oversized chaise lounge. It's supposed to be part of a sectional couch, but we bought it like just that to go up against the wall. All three of our family can sit on it. It has like a big arm. It's super soft, nice little table, overhead light, and super comfy blanket. So that's my go-to spot.
Oh, that sounds amazing. All right. Lastly, what are you reading next?
I have to read our book club book.
Me too. Well, we still have listeners. We have about 3 weeks till book club ish. Yeah, three
Okay.
weeks.
All
We
right, I
got
can do it.
time. Yeah. Listeners, if you're wondering, we're reading Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera is our book club pick for the month. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Esther Avant and her book flight of books that have been most impactful on her life. We'd love to hear what other books have been impactful to your life at www.bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.